breaking, Labour staff and the Conference Arrangements Committee have ruled our conference motion out of order. Joining us is Darren Mclaughlin, who is from Momentum, who's been part of trying to get this through. Are you there, Darren?
Yeah, hi Crispin, I'm here.
You're supporting this motion. What's your feeling on this being ruled out of order by the Conference Arrangements Committee?
Well, to be honest, it appears to me to be like another example of a factional war against the left. The people around Keir Starmer know that Labour for a Green New Deal and the motions they bring are extremely popular, not just with members who would position themselves on the left of the party, but across the spectrum of the Labour Party. And that's because, as you saw in 2019, the Labour for a Green New Deal motion was brought to conference by more than 100 CLPs, and it is the most popular motion in the history of the Labour Party. So they really didn't want this motion to be brought to Keir Starmer's first Labour Party conference because it has very clear socialist demands to explain what needs to happen in order to address the climate crisis. And they would rather not see a kind of left-wing socialist activist group have a big success at the conference, I think.
Can I just sort of show devil's advocate in a way? This is Luke Akehurst's response. A lot of spluttering. This is a nice word to use about one organisation's model motion on Green New Deal being ruled out by Conference Arrangements Committee because it drifted into multiple topics. But it sounds like other motions on Green New Deal that were better have been ruled in. Is that just hoodwinking us, do you think?
Well, I think so. I think people like Luke Akehurst want to depoliticise the Labour Party. They want to return to the days of under the Blair government, in which the conference wasn't very exciting. Members didn't have very much democratic say over what the Labour Party policy was. That's what they want to return to. And the fact is that plenty of other motions have been accepted which touch on multiple topics. And the fact is that the climate crisis is fundamentally an extremely complex thing to tackle. And that means that you do have to tackle it by addressing multiple issues at the same time. It's the only plausible solution to the climate crisis. And what is the outcome going to be of the Labour Party turning away from its commitment to the Green New Deal? When the Labour Party voted through the Green New Deal motion in 2019, it was the most far-reaching and radical climate policy of any political party in the developed world. And now the Labour Party turning against it, despite the fact that it was Keir Starmer's third pledge when he was standing for leader, is that he would put the Green New Deal at the heart of everything that he did. Have you seen any evidence of that? Because I haven't. Right.
Well, I'm going to move on to, thank you for coming on. I'm just going to move on to John McDonnell, who's joined us. Are you there, John?
Yeah. Hi. Can I follow on from Darren? Yeah.
That motion that's been dropped by the Conference Arrangements Committee or ruled out of order, do you think it was too many clauses or whatever in it, or do you think it was a political decision?
They're having a laugh, aren't they? We're using that excuse. They really are. Darren's got it spot on. If people have the chance, go and look at the motion. It absolutely reflects the policy that Becky Long-Bailey and I developed that went into our manifesto. And if you look at the papers that supported that manifesto, so the detailed policy papers, it's an absolute reflection of them. And this idea that somehow the motion covered so many topics, if you're going to tackle climate change, you have to do it in a comprehensive, holistic way. And that's why the resolution reflected that range of issues. So that was just an excuse. This is all part and parcel of trying to slap down the left. We know that. And the excuses that they come out with is farcical, really, at times. But I want to link it to Pam's analysis of the newspapers, if I can. If you look at that Observer story, and by the way, Pam and Howard and others, I think I think Pam might still be under investigation by the party and all the rest. Let me just say this, I'm proud to be on a platform with Pam and Howard, etc. And if you remember, Crispin, I nominated Pam as one of the heroes of our movement when we had that exercise. One of the best candidates I've ever seen, most rooted within her community and absolutely principled. So I just want to, people sometimes don't give Pam and others the recognition that they deserve. So that I'm really proud to be talking alongside them. The story in the Observer, if you get a chance after this, look at Andrew Fisher's analysis of the polling that he's put out there on Twitter, because the story in the Observer and the polling is a reflection of the attitude of basically the person who's advising the leader of the Labour Party at the moment, Deborah Matheson. She was the pollster for Blair for a long period of time. And basically they used polling to mask the hidden agenda of their political objectives, basically. But Andrew Fisher takes it apart. And what that polling says is that we have to appeal to soft Tories if we're going to get back into government. Actually, of course, you always have to win some Tory votes. Of course you do. But what Andrew's pointing out is actually our success under Jeremy was we appealed to non-voters. And we did it by inspiring them. And the reason those young people especially, but others as well, progressives who maybe hadn't voted Labour or hadn't voted in the past, was because they were inspired. And some of that inspiration was based upon the Green New Deal. It was based upon developing policies that no one else was doing to tackle climate change. Why was no one else doing it? Because it required radical change of our economy. So what this motion, they're worried about in this motion is, for example, making sure we have the scale of investment that we need to transform our economy from one that's dependent on fossil fuel to one that's dependent on alternative energy sources. Also, that we actually have to recognize we're not going to be able to tackle climate change unless we bring water and rail and energy into public ownership. What's interesting about that, Ed Miliband went on Newsnight and said that last week. So in the Observer article, you can hear, looks as though people around Starmer are trying to put Ed down as a result of that. They're criticizing him. That's what this battle is all about. They've kept this motion off the agenda because they want to, again, slap down momentum on the left. They've kept it off the agenda because it would recommit conference to that policy we developed under Jeremy, a comprehensive climate change policy. And it is around those key issues, like scale of investment, redistribution of wealth to enable that to happen, to be funded, but in addition to that, public ownership. And remember also, it wasn't just water, rail and energy. We were also looking at use of land as well and bringing some land into public ownership and control. So that's what they're worried about. And I'm furious about it, but if they think just because they've ruled this motion off the agenda at this conference, there's other motions coming up, as Darren has said, not as good as my view, as comprehensive, but there are other motions coming up that are absolutely critical. It's forced Keir Starmer to actually, I don't know whether you saw it yesterday, released it in the newspapers that his speech is going to be on tackling climate change. Well, we'll have a checklist to see how much of the existing policy is in that speech that he supposedly committed himself to. But it does mean also, actually, I think it's mobilizing people within the party and outside of the party to say, even whatever happens at conference, this is going to be a key issue for us, and we're going to be campaigning on it throughout our communities. It's not going to go away. And the solutions we've put forward, I think, are the only solutions because they're on a scale that is needed. Final point on the solutions, we can't tackle climate change unless it's done globally. And one of the issues that Darren and others have been campaigning on is the recognition that actually part of that global role we play is the transfer of technology and resources as part of a reparations program into the global south that enables us then to work together to tackle climate change, because the people who are at the forefront of the climate change issues at the moment are largely in the global south. So yeah, whatever machinations there'll be at Labour Party conference next week, I expect people to be getting up and arguing the case about reference back on this particular motion. And even if we lose that, I expect people to be getting up in the wider debate on climate change to actually be pressing for the policies that were contained in the Green New Deal resolution. In addition to that, when Keir Starmer does speak on Wednesday and is supposed to be focusing on climate change, I expect people to have a checklist to see how far that encompasses our existing policy and also make it clear if it doesn't, our campaign continues on. But it's a campaign that's beyond the Labour Party. This is the existential threat that we face. So I think wherever it goes, it mobilises people. If they think this is deflating our campaign, it's quite the reverse. It's making us stronger by enthusing people that they've got to fight back.
Can I just ask you one other question? Howard Beckett's coming on, is on the call as well. This story in the BBC that came out of an interview of you about Labour losing members. And also that you're calling for a summit with Keir Starmer. I
didn't really, but I'll explain it.
But can I just ask you something? Because it worries me. We're worried about all these people being auto-excluded. Now, Pamela, that spoke about before, she was on a Zoom call with you and Matt Rack, and I think others, and she has been auto-excluded for appearing on that. You haven't been auto-excluded. Are you fearful that you may be targeted? And what do you think? What do you think would happen if they did target you? I mean, they've targeted other MPs now, haven't they? I
check the post every morning. I'm waiting for the letter. I literally check the post every morning because some people are being excluded, exactly as you've just said. Pam and I were on the same platform, Pam, weren't we? On exactly the same platform. So I checked the post. Yesterday, we had Kate Osborne receive a letter threatening disciplinary action. And we got a legal advice immediately, and they admitted, like Jess Palmer, it was an administrative mistake. What's happening on these? I think this is my view. I think the glue, the unit at the Labour Party HQ, they're churning these out on an industrial scale. They've got a team going through past tweets, platforms, and all the rest of it, and they're churning them out on an industrial scale. And what we've got to do, and I said yesterday, we fight every case. So I took Kate's case up. I made sure we got our legal advice. Within 2 hours, they backed down. Now, that was an MP, admittedly. But what we've got to do, I'm on a number, JVL, Jewish Voice for Labour. That thing in the BBC came out of JVL contacting the BBC saying, we'll give you evidence whereby this campaign against anti-Semitism in the Labour Party is resulting in Jewish members being excluded. This is madness. So I put, when they put that statement out, I gave JVL, because I've been working with them over the years since they were founded, I gave them a comment saying that this is ridiculous. This has to be investigated. The party needs to think about what they're doing in this case. So then the BBC, we pressed the BBC and I did a long interview. And one of them was about the expulsions. And I've been testimonial for people like Naomi. I'm one of her character witnesses. They withdraw the action against her, but still give her 12 months sort of probation. I said, that's not acceptable. So I did an interview at the BBC to highlight the JVL cases and said then that what's happening at the moment, they said, is it a purge? Yes, it is. I said, what's happening is they're doing this on an industrial scale. And what's the result? What's the result? The result is demoralization of our members and demotivation. And we've lost at least 100,000 members. Now, my view, if you were being cynical about this, that's why they're doing it, because they want people to give up and walk away. So I'm saying to people, don't fall for it. Recognize what's happening, because the only way you fight this is you staying within the party. And I know that's tough, but we've had good and bad times together. You've been around long enough as well, Crispin. When it's been tough, you stay in and fight. And what you don't do is you don't allow the enemy to draw you onto their territory. You choose the ground upon which you fight. There's that Sun Tzu who did the art of warfare. It's worth reading at times, because the tactics we've got to deploy now is say to people, stay in the party and we fight every individual case and every time they come at us. On a number of them, once we get into legal actions and things like that, we win. But the tactic that some of them are using is dragging it on and on and on so that people give up. And I'm not allowing to do that. So when I did the BBC interview, they said, well, there's going to be rows at conference over David Evans and all the rest of it. I suppose there's one way Keir could sort that out, isn't it? He could get people around the table. He could start engaging with people, listening to what their views are. So I didn't call for a summit, but that's how they interpret it. I don't mind them interpreting that way. But I said, if I was Keir Starmer and I was leader, I'd get everyone around the table. And it'd be all factions. You want to hear what people's views are, and you hammer that argument out. What you don't do is use devices like expulsions and prescriptions to close down democracy within the party. Simple as that. So anyway, that's how it came about. But it was my attempt to try and highlight what was happening to JVL, because if you meet Jenny Manson, Naomi, and the others, these are salt of the earth. These are people who've been campaigning with us in all the way through. They've been campaigning against anti-Semitism. You know, Naomi's family was lost in the Holocaust. But you can't be kicking people like this out of the party. It's absolutely appalling. Yeah. And also, what Naomi's point was in the brilliant video that she did for Momentum, it is, we should concentrate on real anti-Semitism. That's the whole focus of it. And doing this undermines that fight. You know, it deflects us from that real fight. Anti-Semitism is out there, and we have to campaign against it, but this isn't the way to do it. Anyway, so that was what the interview was all about. But any other leader of the Labour Party, you know, I'm old enough to remember Harold Wilson when I was a kid. Harold Wilson had a cabinet of left, right, and centre. It was rumbustious, but he brought people together. He genuinely did unite the party. And that's how you go about building a major movement that can take you into power. You can't do it with factional fighting. The point I made is, I'll shut up at this point. The point Pam made about newspapers, every now and again, I'll get an article in The Guardian, not very often, but every now and again. I think they sort of throw me a bone every now and again. I did an article a couple of weeks ago, and it was about, you know, if we look at the opinion polls at the moment, it's like a corrugated thing. Boris Johnson screws up and we go up a little bit. Then he calms it down and we go down. So we're behind the Tories consistently. Keir's opinion poll ratings are bombed. They've collapsed completely. So I said, we can't go on like this. And we're within, potentially after the election, within 18 months of a general election, because they'll most probably go in 2023, April, May, something like that. The only way you can do that is have, one, you fight back against the Tories. You know, you call them out for what they are. It shouldn't be left to Dawn Butler calling Johnson a liar and corrupt and all the rest. So that should be in the theme for a long period of time. But also, when you campaigning, you have to have a policy program, a vision of the society you want to create. And you can't keep on sending shadow cabinet members up on the TV and they criticize the Tories. And then when the interviewer says, well, what would you do? And they've got no answer. And the third point I made in the article is you stop factional fighting. You genuinely unite people. And it's not a matter of kicking out the right or the left or whatever. You just bring people together and you have a democratic party. It's not much to ask for, is it? I'm ranting here, Crispin. You better stop me.
Well, look, thank you for coming on, John. And hopefully we'll see you at a conference as well on the Saturday. Thank you.
All the best. Cheers.
Now, as I say, we've also got Howard Beckett here on the call. Howard, are you there?
Morning, Crispin.
Thank you for waiting. Now, there's a couple of things that I'd like to speak to you about. One is that yesterday you had the launch of Labour Left for Socialism. Can you tell us more about the launch and what the plans are for the future on this?
Yes, it was intended originally, Crispin, to be a conference, but obviously people are concerned at the climate that we're in at the moment. So we moved forward with a launch with the appointment then of a standing orders committee to meet in October, and then the first conference to be in November. So we had speakers on the topics of climate, free speech, workers' rights, war and internationalism, anti-racism, public services in the NHS, in order to show that we are serious about policies. You know, Darren's contribution and John's contribution. The saddest thing about where we find ourselves at the moment with the Labour Party is that we are not having the debate about policies because Starmer has started this fight with the left. But as well as those policy agendas, Crispin, we did at the end of this call for everyone to vote against David Evans at conference. And I'm very pleased that the way things are going at the moment, it very much looks like Unite, FBU, Bakers, TESA, CLPD and Momentum will all be calling for conference not to endorse the appointment of David Evans. And for those out there who think that this is in some way a sectarian response or individualising this, it is not. We are presenting policy agendas, but we are also saying an individual who is responsible for the loss of well over 100,000 members, responsible for the dire financial state of the party, and is taking credit for going to war with left socialists within the party cannot be endorsed by conference.
Yeah, and but while you bring that subject up, I've got the results of a poll that I sent out to all our mailing lists. If you just bear with me, I'll show you the results now. It'd be quite interesting to hear what you think about this, because do you think Labour's conferences make or break for Keir Starmer sort of level? But then when we hear these are all Labour members, by the way. These are not expelled or auto-excluded. These are just Labour members. There's 787, as you see at the bottom there. Are you alarmed at the number of Labour Party members sent auto-exclusion letters before the party conference? These are Labour members. 92% are alarmed at this. Has Labour lost its integrity as a democratic organisation? 89% of Labour members believe that's the case. This is a poll of delegates. These are people who said they are delegates, 61 of them. Do you think David Evans should face a card vote to be ratified as Labour General Secretary? 95% of delegates said of those polled said that he should be. And tellingly, would you vote to ratify David Evans as Labour Party General Secretary? 92% said no, only 8% in favour of him. And if you look at the result for the Labour members as a whole, 91% of Labour members do not think David Evans should be ratified as General Secretary. So this sort of goes along with what you were saying with Unite's executive decision and the other groups. I mean, do you think there's a possibility he could be in trouble?
I do, Crispin. I would like to meet the 8% and the 9% to find out what's going through their heads. Yes, I do think that he could be in trouble. I'm hearing that they are going to go to a card vote in reference to this. I'm hearing that they think that they've got the majority of 54 to 46 or 56 to 44. But I do think that he will be in trouble. As a reference before, Unite's position was confirmed at our executive last week or the week before last. The Bakers and the FBU, I imagine, will follow. Obviously, we've all seen the tweet from Dave Ward in respect to the position of CWU, and we know CLPD and Momentum will be advocating to vote against Starmer. So yes, I think that despite the fact that the conference floor, you can expect it to have been steered towards Starmer supporters. I do feel that he will be in trouble, and I think that the Labour leadership is right to go to a card vote. I think if they don't go to a card vote and they denied a democracy in respect of the position of the General Secretary, that would be a car crash for them. I think that there would be an organic response to that on the conference floor. And I think once they do go to the card vote, I think it will be very close. And I would like to talk to the 8%, the 9%, and understand quite what is going through their thought process. You know, this man is overseeing 100,000 plus members leaving, finances in a dire straits, people being made redundant, Crispin, because of his handling of the Labour Party. And obviously we know that he's taken responsibility for Jeremy's suspension. The disciplinary process is not fit for purpose. People being given 7 days on auto-expulsion letters. It's quite disgusting whenever we think about the mental torment that people are being put through. So no, he doesn't deserve to be endorsed at conference. And I very much hope that the groundswell that we are all creating, I very much hope that will move forward to conference and become something that is undefeatable.
I mean, there are people who will be loyal to whoever Keir Starmer supports, as a sort of like, and that would be always their response to anything. Whoever the leader wants, they'll vote along with that. I mean, but as you've said, this is almost like an existential threat to the Labour Party. I mean, if we can persuade those people who are always going to obey what the leadership say, I mean, that's vital, isn't it? In the next week, I mean, we have to go out there and get our voices heard on this, don't we?
Yeah, Crispin, I've said before that this is a statement of defiance on the part of the left, and it's a statement of solidarity and a statement of unity. But let's be honest in respect of this. If the Labour Party loses the left, it loses its soul. It is in that existential crisis. It will no longer have a purpose for which it exists. And it is only the left who are offering policy agendas. It's the reason why at our Labour Left for Socialism conference, our launch yesterday, we emphasised the policies on our policy agendas in respect of climate change, free speech, workers' rights, war, anti-racism. Who can be happy with the way that the Labour Party has dealt with the issue of Islamophobic allegations and anti-black racism within our own ranks, and obviously public services and saving the NHS and reversing out privatisation? It is only the left that offers that agenda. And if David Evans is successful with what he's trying to do, then that agenda will be lost for the Labour Party for generations. And that is the extent of the existential crisis. And that's why many of us feel that we have a moral responsibility now to stand up and say what needs to be said, and to ask people to vote down David Evans at conference, because we all want to be in a position that at the end of this path that we can at least look ourselves in the mirror and say that we did everything that we possibly could to maintain the historic link between the Labour Party, workers and socialism.
Oh, thank you. There's just one other thing. If David Evans wins a vote by, say, 55 to 45 or something like that, surely it would be a case for Keir Starmer to say this guy has not got the confidence of the party. I mean, even if he wins, but by a small amount, it's just not acceptable, is it?
Well, it's not acceptable, but obviously what the statement will make if he wins by a small amount, it will only be because of the efforts that they've gone to in order to get the balance on the floor in reference to the delegates. As your polling shows, Crispin, if we went out to the wider membership, we all know what the position is in regard to the popularity or not of David Evans. And we all know why hundreds of thousands of people are leaving the Labour Party. But Crispin, I just want to say to everybody going into conference to have confidence and to have optimism, no matter how the conference goes. It is our opportunity to have our voice heard. It is the epitome of free speech. There will be organic reactions to the way that Starmer has handled his management of the Labour Party and the attack on the left. And there will also be organic reactions to the lack of inspiration and the lack of a transformative agenda. But the optimism that we should have is that we are still here. The Labour movement is still here after decades of being attacked. In 2017, we know how close we came to achieving a socialist government in our countries for the very first time. And we know how enthused young people were. So if we maintain our journey, if we maintain our vision for society, if we are brave and articulate those policies that can be transformative, then the left will ultimately be successful. And that's why coming out of conference, after conference, Labour Left for Socialism will be arranging a series of conferences to give people the platform to talk of socialist agendas, to be attractive to young people, and to say very clearly that it is socialism that is the future for the Labour Party, regardless as to whether a transient leader believes in that or not.
Thank you very much for coming on, Howard. Great to see you again. And see you on Saturday before the conference starts. On what
see you then, Crispin.
Will probably be the big vote then, wouldn't it, on the Saturday?
It will be, yes, indeed. It should be on Saturday. So yeah, it'll be a great day, hopefully.
Yeah, by the breach. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Crispin.